Hello? Hello? Hello, Hamza?
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. आवाज आ
Assalamu
रही?
Hamza. Are we good with our time?
हाँ बिल्कुल.
But Hamza, सबसे पहले तो I'm so grateful to you that you're here again today with me. But before we start with the conversation,
Hmm.
maybe the quality of picture might not be so good, but the sound seems to be okay. Can you
Okay.
okay?
Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you all right,
Okay.
absolutely. So this is so since we will be, I mean, the whole objective of this meeting was, and this was my request to you, with regards to the recent announcement of the Prize in Physics. So yesterday I sent you a message and I said, Hamza, let's talk about it because there seems to be quite a bit of controversy about it. So I think the focus is about that, and my conversation with you is really about helping someone like me and others like me who are not really experts but are interested enough in physics to understand from folks like you who have the time and currently involved with similar research. You're currently at Oxford doing your DPhil. And sorry Hamza, मैं बोल रही हूँ खुद ही, लेकिन it's really about
No worries.
with reference
Um,
to our last conversation. Interestingly, here comes the announcement, which is pretty much close to what you talked about, right?
yes. Yes.
So, as we spoke, so tell us about this. So, what was this? This is the trio who got the Nobel Prize. I have got their names down. I know one is from France, one is from the US, the other is from Austria. And so I'm not sure whether the research was collaborative or maybe just, so I'm not sure about those details. So do kind of, introduce us to this whole, what is this Nobel Prize about to begin with?
Okay. A very short question first. Do you want me to speak in English or do you want me
Hamza,
to?
I was thinking that, yeah, in fact, let's set the rules right now. What do you think? I'm okay with both. I just thought that speaking in English might have more of an international audience.
Right.
And however, I feel if we were to go bilingual, so I'm really, so I'll give that decision to you.
So it depends on the audience. Like, are we targeting Pakistani people or are we targeting professional physicists? Because if we are targeting professional physicists, then it makes more sense to speak in English. Whereas if we are targeting Pakistani audience, I think English will only complicate things.
Yes, but I feel the nature of a conversation and what I'm hoping to, the kind of response I'm hoping to get from you can be a little technical, and
Okay,
so
okay, okay.
let's
Yeah,
let's be experimental about it and go for English.
okay, okay. Let's do
Because
it.
there is this whole question about that even the Nobel Committee itself, there's people like physicists like Sabine, who's very controversial, the German physicist, and she says in a tweet, "What is this? How are they even? They're not getting it right." And there are lots of other perspectives like that. So I thought maybe,
Okay, okay, sounds good. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So
So
okay, over to
I'm
you.
going to give a long answer because I think it's really important to understand the context of this Nobel Prize.
Yeah,
Because the Nobel Prize uh, is really about the question first asked by Einstein
right,
and Polsky and Rosen back in 1935.
right.
So Einstein was not very happy with quantum mechanics, and uh, he had a number of objections to quantum mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1935, Einstein, along with two of his colleagues, Podolsky and Rosen, wrote this paper about a thought experiment. And the thought experiment was that if you have two particles, two quantum particles, which are created by a single source, and those two particles are,
Entangled.
entangled. So back then, entanglement was not even that, there was no term about quantum entanglement back then. So Einstein didn't actually use this term entanglement. But the thought experiment was that there's a source which produces two particles, which are, somehow related or somehow correlated. And then, so for these two particles, you can write a wave function, okay? And then you can, you can have these particles move far, far away. So then there's this problem that if you consider the wave function, if you think that the wave function describes the complete reality of those particles, then if you measure the particle, if you measure a property of one of the particles, then a corresponding property of the other particle gets determined instantaneously.
Yes.
So no matter how much the distance between these two particles is, as soon as you measure one of the particles, as soon as you measure one of the properties of one of the particles, a similar property of the other particle gets determined instantaneously. So Einstein was not happy about this because it seemed to contradict the idea that the speed of light is the maximum speed that any particle
is this what he was referring to as the spooky action at a distance?
Yes.
So science cannot be spooky, I suppose. That's what he thought. He was not happy with that idea.
Yeah. So he would say things like, this seems like spooky action at a distance. There must be some mechanism which we don't know about.
Yeah.
And from the thought experiment, Einstein and two of his colleagues, they came to the conclusion that quantum mechanics must be incomplete. The wave function of the two particles doesn't describe everything that there is.
Right.
So that was this objection. And back in 1935, some physicists tried to respond to this objection, most notably Niels Bohr. But the problem was that back then it was really hard to think of an experiment to do it, to really check this, to test this thought experiment. So people thought that this is a philosophical argument. We don't need to worry about it. Quantum mechanics works fine, and you don't really have to worry about the spookiness. So people just they tried to just push this under the rug. And then anyway, so and until the end of his life, Einstein was not happy, and this debate, this thought experiment was pretty much ignored. But then in 1964, a particle physicist, John Bell, he came up with a mathematical theorem. And the mathematical theorem said that, if Einstein was right, that if there really are some hidden variables, which are not part of standard quantum mechanics, then this certain inequality must be obeyed. And because this was this inequality could be tested in the laboratory, so people thought that this theorem brought this philosophical debate in the lab. But there is a caveat. So Einstein, in his thought experiment, he was assuming something which is called locality. And locality means that anything that happens to a particle, so I'm really trying to explain it in as simple terms as possible.
As simple as possible. Yes, that's fine.
So locality means that if you have a particle, if you have a present state of a particle, the future of the particle will only be determined by whatever is around that particle. So there is a certain locality. You cannot have something which is like many light years away affect the particle.
Yet they're connected.
Yeah. So there cannot be, so there has to be, and that locality for Einstein, that locality was related to the speed of light limit.
Right.
So Einstein was assuming locality, and John Bell in his theorem, he also assumed locality.
Okay.
Okay, and he also showed that mathematically quantum mechanics predicted something different from that inequality. So quantum mechanics was
Sorry.
actually
So John Bell also assumed that there were hidden variables, or did he agree with Einstein on that? Okay.
Yeah. So John Bell assumed hidden variables, locality, and
Okay.
there was another assumption which is of statistical independence. I think we can ignore that for a while because
Okay.
that,
Sure.
you know.
In the interest
Anyway,
of
so
time and simplicity.
yeah, so John Bell showed that the predictions of quantum mechanics actually violated that inequality. So mathematically that was shown. Now, it was for the experimentalists to check it. So but John Bell's paper was also ignored, and then fast forward to 1972, Clauser and Friedman created the first experiment to test the inequality, and the inequality was actually violated.
Right. Was violated in the experiments.
Yeah. Yes. Wow. So this was by John Clauser and Friedman, and this was in 1972. So so Clauser is the American who got the Nobel Prize, right?
Yes.
But then, there were some loopholes in the experiments. People said that, there could be some of the detectors were not that efficient because you also need good technology to do these kind of experiments.
Right.
So the detectors were not efficient, and maybe there is some hidden variable, which could have influence and which which they were unable to measure. So then people were still skeptical. Later on in 1982, Alain Aspect did a more convincing experiment. So he closed some of the loopholes and the detectors were more efficient by then. So that was Alain Aspect's PhD project. And I think he spent like 7 or 8 years on 2 or 3 experiments. And then later on, there were some even more loopholes, which were finally closed by Anton Zeilinger's group.
Yeah.
So so all the possible loopholes were closed in 2015. So Zeilinger kept on, doing more sophisticated versions of these experiments and, like closing even more loopholes. Okay. So in 2015, most of the physicists were convinced that, there is something spooky going on. So there is non-locality, because if John Bell's inequality was violated, then it means that one of the assumptions is incorrect.
That's
so
right.
So many physicists believe that the assumption of locality is incorrect. So there is non-locality. Right. So Einstein was wrong, and the experiment was, and the Nobel Prize was actually awarded for this, these 3 experiments or these range of experiments.
I'll just stop you there. Yeah, sorry, I'll just stop you there. So this, as the prize was announced, it's this Swiss physicist by the name of Nicholas. Sorry, I'm not getting it right, but he says, this prize is well deserved, but is a bit late. Most of the work was done in 1970s and 80s, and Nobel Committee was very slow, and now is likely to eventually award this prize. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, it is actually very late. So there's this, and again, I think it's late because of a sociological phenomenon in physics, and this is the first experiment by Clauser was actually in 1972, and the Nobel Prize is awarded in 2022. So it's really like 50 years late.
Yes.
And so if you talk to people who are working on these kind of experiments or who were thinking about these things back in 70s and 80s, they were really discouraged to do these kind of experiments in mainstream physics. Mm-hmm. It was really hard to do these experiments in the academia, to get a job. Or, I mean, if you were a PhD student back then and wanted to work on these experiments, you would be strongly discouraged. And even Alain Aspect, so before doing his experiment, before building his experiment, he went to John Bell. And he asked John Bell, he wanted his advice or, his encouragement. And the first question John Bell asked John Bell posed to Elaine Aspect was, do you have a permanent position?
Oh, that's interesting.
So implying that, if you don't have a secure position and if you do these kind of experiments, you may sabotage your career.
Just don't dabble into it.
Yeah. So
Don't take that risk.
even in the 90s, people who were working in this area, and by the way, this area is broadly called foundations of quantum mechanics or quantum foundations.
That's right.
People who are working in this area, in the 80s and 90s, so many of their careers were destroyed. The academia was not really willing to accept them, and there were no jobs for them. So,
Wow.
so they had to pretend.
They were destroyed. Sorry, they were destroyed because they were still in the theoretical realm and had not. There was not enough evidence in the lab work, or what happened, or there was just ideological disagreement.
So it was both ways. So of course there is disagreement in theory, and this disagreement is still there. And even today, many of the questions are still open.
Okay.
But this is how science, is supposed to work. Like,
yes.
Science progresses with disagreement. But the problem was that the organizations which were providing grants and funding, and the people who were big shots and running the departments of physics, they were not willing to accept this area as legitimate physics.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying that this is too philosophical, or this is not really physics.
Yes, I get it. Yeah.
So that was a problem. Yes.
Right.
So in a way, this prize is really a big win for people who persevered and kept working on the things they were passionate about. And some of them had to change their careers, but some of them survived, and they.
And my favorite underlying thought is, okay, just keep pursuing inquiry, pursuing questions.
Yes, so I think Zeilinger, in his interview to the Nobel Committee, he said that so he gave some advice to the young people that keep following your interests, don't worry too much about applications or these practical aspects.
Yeah, because when I spoke to you last, and you seem to have the similar kind bent of mind where you're willing to take those risks and open up Pandora's boxes, and you're quite happy being that inquirer and questioning, even if tomorrow whatever your research that you're doing focusing on, it may not be proven right with time, but you're okay with that. And remember, we spoke, Brian Greene said, I'm quite happy to move on to the next question. So Hamza, again, with regards to this prize, so how does it relate to contemporary research on a more practical level and in terms of its application?
Right. So again, it ties to the question of why the Nobel Committee, decided to give the prize this year, or why the prize is awarded now. It's a legitimate question. Why now? Okay. And that is that now it's very hard to dismiss the application of quantum entanglement and non-locality, because with the rise of interest in quantum computing, quantum teleportation,
that's right,
we really are exploiting this spooky action at a distance, to our advantage. So if you think about quantum teleportation, it's a new way to send information from one place to another, then it's very much it's quite secure as compared to traditional methods.
So it is actually hopefully we'll be seeing this. It's a new emerging technology, right?
Yes, and it's already
quantum computing and quantum information theory. Am I right? I mean,
yes.
Would you like to shed some light on that?
Yes. So this so quantum computing and quantum information industry really uses this weird aspect of quantum mechanics, which is called entanglement, right? So and entanglement, this term entanglement goes back to Schrodinger. So in the same year when Einstein was was posing this objection spooky action at a distance, Schrodinger wrote a paper about the Schrodinger's cat paradox.
Okay.
And in the very same paper, I think he also said something on the lines of that the main feature of quantum mechanics is really entanglement. So these days, quantum computing and quantum cryptography, quantum teleportation is exploiting this fundamental feature of quantum mechanics, which is entanglement, which is that if two particles interact, or if two particles are produced by the same source, they can have some very strong correlations, which we simply cannot have in a non-quantum system. And so we can exploit the entanglement and these strong correlations to do some kind of calculations or create some new algorithms which were not possible before. So quantum computing was really embracing this idea, embracing this spookiness of quantum mechanics to our benefit. And if I talk about research being done in my group, we are exploiting entanglement to understand language and to create some kind of artificial intelligence to reason about language and to do natural language processing. So it really is a very futuristic way to do computing and information processing.
Yes.
It wouldn't have been possible if
so it still remains spooky enough, Hamza. I mean, in the sense that when you're talking about language, I'm confused. Are we talking about the language that you and I communicating? Is it that medium? Is it the language of mathematics, language of physics? So what language are we referring to here? What is the means of communication? Bytes, qubits. So I'm just a little confused there. If you can help me and others, hopefully, to understand. Maybe you don't have the answer yet, but give us the direction.
I think it's really the idea. So Max Planck, who is arguably arguably the father of quantum mechanics, if you will.
Yeah.
So he said something like, in science, progress happens one funeral at a time. We don't make progress because people change their, if you grow up learning certain concepts and certain theories, you become used to it. So in a sense, you become indoctrinated, right?
Yes.
Whereas, a newborn child, or a young kid going to school, if he or she is exposed to a new theory, which is the normal in that time, then it stops being spooky, right? I mean, if you somehow go back to Aristotle's time and
yes,
and tell him about general relativity, he would call it spooky, right? So it's all a matter of becoming used to new ways of thinking. And once you become used to new ways of thinking, you can apply them in different areas. So when I say that we exploit entanglement to reason about language, I'm not saying that language is quantum or language is made of quantum physics. I'm not making this claim. I'm just saying that the kind of ways of thinking that quantum mechanics gives us, we can use this way of thinking to create a better theory of language, or a better theory of anything.
Communication, I suppose.
Yeah, but in so the kind of thing that we are doing, it's really information processing at a higher level. So like in computer science, there's this broad area of natural language processing, which is like making computers understand human languages.
So is this something that will help us to improve the future generation of quantum computers? Remember last time when we discussed, you said quantum computers are already being produced. They are being made. They're out there. So would you say that this will contribute towards, in terms of application of this Nobel Prize?
Yes. So the very first algorithms for quantum computing were about very niche problems, some this Shor's algorithm, Deutsch algorithm, Grover's algorithm. So they were restricted to very specialized problems, whereas this quantum inspired natural language processing that we are doing, it's more about exploiting the basic principles like superposition and entanglement to do natural language processing with the kind of quantum computers we already have, right? So there are engineering challenges, and there are challenges for building quantum computers with a higher number of qubits. So that's a separate thing, but it's fundamentally a new way of thinking about quantum computing, right?
And I suppose encrypted.
And it was
encrypted
and again
communication is very much embedded in this.
And I would go back to the same comment about applications. So so there's this story about how we discovered this analogy between quantum computing and language. And that, again, we were not really looking for this kind of analogy. It just happened. It was, a coincidence that some people were talking about quantum teleportation, and there were some linguists in the audience, and
yes,
they said that
you were one of them, right?
No, I was not one of them. This was like
what I'm trying to say, your research, when we spoke about your research, you were pretty excited about the language, the linguistic aspect of this.
Yes, so currently I'm working on this thing, like quantum inspired linguistics or natural language processing, and I'm working with someone who did his PhD in the late 80s and 90s, and then who really struggled to get a job because his PhD was...
Sorry about that. Sorry.
Yeah.
I just
so my supervisor's PhD was on on quantum foundations, and it was hard for him to get a job in physics. And so eventually he got a job, but in the computer science department in Oxford.
Oh.
And he says that he is the first professor with the title Professor of Quantum Foundations. So he, which is very interesting, given that this field is not that new. It's an old field, right? It's 100 years old, but he's the first professor with this title, and he was not even hired by the physics department.
Right.
So in a way, he pretended to be a logician or a computer scientist to be able to do the kind of work that he does. And so it's so he can talk more about this thing that this.
But a young person like you, who's initiating into this field and is super passionate about it, you must be pretty excited about this Nobel Prize. And so
in my undergrad.
Yeah, go ahead.
When I was doing my undergrad in Pakistan, I did my thesis with LUMS Phys Lab with Dr. Sabi Anwar, and we recreated some of these experiments. So we recreated alien aspects experiment. We also recreated Clauser's experiment.
Oh, was it what you referred to, the single photon lab? Was it?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So because technology, has progressed, so nowadays we can do these kind of experiments even in undergraduate labs. So we recreated some of these experiments, and then I read papers by John Bell, and this is how I got interested in this area, actually.
Wow.
So there's a very nice book by John Bell, which I think I would like to show to the screen.
Okay, speakable and unspeakable in quantum mechanics.
Yes, and this is the second edition, and you can see the name of the Nobel.
Alan Aspect, of course.
Yeah,
Alan Aspect.
He wrote the introduction of this.
Yes. Apparently, he did have some communication with the late scientist, John Bell,
Yes, yes,
who
yes.
unfortunately I think died in his early 60s.
No,
Yeah.
in 90s.
I mean, when
Yeah.
he was in his early 60s. Yeah.
Yeah. So if John Bell were alive, I think he would be the most deserving to get this prize. So I think this prize is really John Bell's prize, and I
Right.
think some of the people working in this area would agree with me. So this book is like really important. I think most of the controversy around the Nobel Prize and
Speakable
uh,
and unspeakable
yes,
important.
and so most of this controversy on the mistakes in the press release of the Nobel Prize would be resolved if people read this book.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that title. And because I was certainly not aware of that book, however, I do.
So
I
interestingly,
recall. Yeah, yeah.
many physicists don't even, so they have opinions on this experiment, but they don't read this book, and they have a very huge misconception.
Why is
Uh,
that? What is that?
I
Why?
think again, it's a sociological thing that physicists don't read the original papers, and they get the history of a subject from the main textbook, or they hear it from the professors, and the professors hear it from their professors. So there is this sociological problem. So there is a
Right.
very huge misconception which I would like to talk about,
Yeah,
which is
sure.
that,
Please. We have limited time. Do go into it and share your thoughts about it.
yeah. So like I said, one of the main assumptions in Bell's theorem was locality, right? So when these experiments showed that uh, the inequality was violated, many people thought that it means that all hidden variable theories are ruled out, right? So
Yeah.
all hidden variable theories,
Yeah.
whereas it actually rules out local hidden variable theories. So locality is ruled out, not all hidden variable
All
theories.
hidden variable. That's right.
Yes, and John Bell himself was a proponent of a hidden variable theory which was non-local.
So, in that sense, Bell and Einstein were more or less on the same page, weren't they?
No, they were not on the same page. Because
He also mentioned about the hidden variables, right? Einstein did talk
yeah,
about the hidden variables.
yes, but Einstein wanted local hidden variables, whereas John Bell showed that local hidden variables are, they are ruled out, and now they are ruled out by experiment. So we cannot have a hidden variable
Oh, well, that's
with
very
local.
interesting. That's very interesting. So, in a way, this is more subtle and more refined thinking about hidden variables,
Yes, and
thanks
even
to experimental physics.
yes, and even if you read the press release of the Nobel Prize,
Yes, yes, yes. Tell me
there
about
is
it.
this mistake there. They
Yeah,
say that they say that all hidden variable theories are ruled out.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, and that's what Sabine kind of mentioned in a tweet, not exactly in those words, but she does say that nobody's gotten it right. Eventually, she does
Yes,
refer
but
to one of the
yes,
articles.
But Sabina has a different view. She
Yeah,
says
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah, yeah.
she says that locality is not ruled out. She is targeting another assumption, which is of statistical independence. She says that, so Sabina is with Einstein.
Yes, yes, yes. I think, though I'm not in that league, absolutely not. But I'm also partially with Einstein because the spooky action for me is still not resolved. I mean, okay,
I
Star
mean,
Trek. Star
if so,
Trek,
if,
then I think
if
we talk about teleportation, then I mean, right now we're looking at the micro phenomena, but I'm sure that one day you and I will be entangled with our God knows entangled twins somewhere light how many light years away. So I'm still being a little I don't know theatrical about it. But since we have very little time, so just your final thoughts on this and your own way forward with regards to this. No, and I like the fact that you mentioned that even the press release of the Nobel Committee, there were gaps in that, and I wonder why, because they're experts out
again, I think it's just a symptom of the problem that I stated, that people don't read in physics, especially.
there. Yeah.
People don't read original texts. I mean, it's understandable. You don't have to read Newton's Principia, but the debates that are still not resolved, it's good if you read the original texts, right? So
Right,
I mean, if you are working on foundations of quantum mechanics or foundational physics, you need to, it's a good idea to read original papers rather than secondhand accounts.
right, right. So, and I suppose also I do believe that it's a bit bureaucratic also. Nobel physics, a Nobel in the entire Nobel committee does get bureaucratic at some stage.
Yes,
So it could be attributed to that also. But so you feel this is really a win for Bell, late John Bell.
yes, a win for Bell and for all the people who followed their passions and worked on these things. I mean, some of them are dead, some of them are alive. Some of them are in academia, some are not in academia, but it's really a win for quantum foundations.
Yes, yes.
And it's going to, hopefully it's going to uh, bring more funding and more interest in this area. But I think I think the Nobel Committee should really clarify or correct the press release, because it can do more harm than good.
I think that's a very important point you've made, Hamza. And I suppose with that, because I don't know, at some point, any second, this will disappear. But I suppose these experiments and this prize has kind of laid the foundation, you could say, of the revolution that will be coming into quantum technology, and hopefully which will be feeding into much more advanced and nuanced research in quantum information theory and its applications, I suppose, which will be applicable anywhere. I mean, not only in pure sciences, but in social sciences as well. Am I right?
Yeah.
So, Hamza, thank you so much, because it was great to have that conversation, because it was really, I suppose, we've not really closed all the questions, but more questions have come out. But we have closed some fundamental, with this prize, some fundamental questions have been closed because of the fact that the experimental side of physics has showed that. Is it as simple as that, or is it more?
No, I think some of the, in science, whenever you do an experiment, some questions are closed and more questions are opened. But I think the prize is really, has brought this discussion into the limelight. So I think I would celebrate that.
That's right. That's right. And so the case is closed, but yet very much open. And people like you should be extremely excited to venture further into it. So good luck, and thank you so much for your time, Hamza, on a very short notice. Well, it's a Sunday there. I hope you're having a good Sunday. And are you guys celebrating the prize? Did you do that at Oxford?
Yes, we already did that. So 2 days ago, we had a nice lunch at a French restaurant. So
really?
and we did a toast to John Bell and Elaine Aspect and Zeilinger.
Wow. If there's some pictures, please share them at some point.
No, there's no picture.
So I'm happy to hear that at Oxford you did a toast to John Bell and celebrated the prize, because you're very passionate about this field. So thank you so much, Hamza. I will be in touch, and you will be my go-to person when it comes to quantum physics, and the resident Pakistani expert, sitting at Oxford right now.
Yeah, okay. But again, yeah. I'm not an expert.
No, you're not an expert, but this is what you're doing right now. You're, I mean, we're sitting out here and we're looking more into science journalism and reporting rather than really into the substance and the meat itself. But through you people, we get to understand it. So you're doing a brilliant job of that. And so, Hamza, thank you again. And inshallah, look forward to another conversation.
Inshallah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.